Hello, hello. Welcome to Healthy Perspectives, a podcast that takes on current cultural and social issues through a clinical lens. Hello, hello. All right, welcome back. I noticed that my lighting is off, so give me a second. I'm going to try to fix it. Hey, there we are. And now you should be able to see me better. For those of you following on Rumble or YouTube, I had a little lighting flaw, but I got it fixed. So your tip of the day today: know who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. Stay intensely focused on that today for our podcast. With that, the second worst disorder in America today. The other day, what was this? Probably a week ago at this point, I did a podcast called The Worst Disorder in America. And I went in there and I talked specifically about the problem around oppression, oppressiveness, the oppressor, the victimhood, entitlement. That is precisely why today is only the second worst disorder going on in America. Because the first is that one. Think about this. That one inevitably leads to violence, no matter what. It's just a matter of time before the oppressor, oppressed, victim, entitled mentality, that approach to the world will eventually, no matter what you do, will eventually disintegrate everything into a violence. An us, them, a oppressor, oppressed, a victim who's tired of being the victim, so they become the aggressor. And then they try to victimize all of the oppressors. And you notice it's a nasty, terrible cycle. That's the worst disorder. But the second and very close runner up, because it's only a step away, is the lack of identity. That's right. If we are a nation who lacks identity, if you are a person who lacks identity, you are one step away from being the victim or the oppressor. And the worst part of this one is that even though it's a step further from the violence, the coercive nature of somebody who is who does not have an identity, it is so easy for anybody to grab a hold of somebody who has no identity and make them feel all warm and fuzzy. Hey, come on, come with me. We got you. You can be part of the A team or the B team or the C or the D or whatever. Whatever team you want them to be on, they're on it. Done. Why? They don't care. They don't have an identity. And so they will use whoever there is with them to start to create their own identity. So you could come in and be like, you should be racist. Yeah, I'm going to be racist. Let's go. Let's racism. Right? Or you could say, you should be violent. Yeah, let's go. Let's be violent. Why? Because they don't have an identity of their own at all. So that makes it the second biggest problem or disorder in America, is a complete lack of identity. Now, a while back, I did what I think was a relatively controversial podcast on the tipping point for diversity. And a lot of people didn't really like that very much. But around here at Healthy Perspectives, we don't avoid the hard topics. We get right after it, because our goal here is to help you process current cultural, social, and psychological issues from a clinical lens. And so when we did this podcast way back, we highlighted a bunch of things. But actually, I'm going to point you to a couple of things. the coercive nature. I'm going to switch gears. This is just so much more important. When you have no identity, the tipping point is you become coerced easily, right? I did one called Mobs and Riots back in October of 24, where I talked about how when you look at the research on mobs and riots, protests that gone wrong, what we see is 60 to 80% of the population is easily coerced or swayed because they aren't coming in with good moral structures in place. Which, if you think about that, when we've hit this cultural tipping point of, we have all these different, they call it the melting pot, right? All these different cultures and backgrounds, and how over the last probably 10 years or so, it has become socially acceptable to say, I can be anything and do anything that I want, even if it's outside of my design, which isn't true. But let's say that's been going on for the last 10 years, because the reality is it has been. What we end up with is this perfect storm of middle people, the 60 to 80%, who have gotten far too quiet and are easily moved. They're easily shifted. Well, people are like, why after Joe Biden and all that stuff, why is the Republican Party so strong right now? 60 to 80%. A bunch of people, either you could make the argument that they saw the light, or you're just taking that 60 to 80% of the people who are not rooted in who I was, who I am, and who I want to be, and knowing their own moral structures, their own character gifts. And they're just being moved from one party to the other. So you end up with what looks like a big swing. And when we have no identity and we don't know who we were, who we are, and who we want to be, that's what's going to happen over and over and over again. So that's what makes it the worst in American history, in this time in American history. The second worst disorder at this time in American history. Because we haven't fixed that yet. We haven't said, whoa, time out. Who are we as a nation? Now, some of you would argue, we established that in the Constitution. I agree. However, if people aren't reading the Constitution, they aren't understanding the Constitution, they aren't putting it into the framework of, wait a minute, this was a persecuted people who came to the United States, wasn't the United States at the time, came to America, and through their persecution decided that there had to be a better way. Those are the same people who said, and by the way, slavery, even though we adopted it early in our history, is not a good idea. It's a bad idea. We shouldn't have that. Let's eradicate it. Let's get rid of it. But right now, at this time, we have become so diverse in thought, in opinion, in what could be, that we lack the foundation of who we were and who we are. And all we're focusing on is who we think we can be, which look, I'm all for it. Yeah, the idea of being excited about your potential, but potential has to be rooted in reality. And that has been getting lost, which makes people easily coerced, really easily coerced. So what do we do about this? That's the inevitable final question. What do we do about this? Well, what I'm going to tell you, in a clinical world, exactly where I would start. I always start with this. Tell me about your family. Might be a genogram for those of you who, like the idea of exploring who you are or were, like where you came from. Put together a genogram. That might be hard for you. Some of you, if you're adopted, you might struggle with that because you're like, I don't know who my real parents were. Or you might say, well, these are my real parents, even though I'm adopted. Yeah, no, look, you put together a genogram based on how you see your family, who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. A genogram is a snapshot of where I came from and who I am. It does not focus on where I'm going. So we start with something like a genogram, or maybe you would want to write your story. Who was I at these different phases in life? Who was I when I was a child? Who was I when I was an adolescent? Who was I when I was a young adult? Who was I when before I was in a family of my own and after I created a family of my own? Who am I? In all these different facets of your life is really a good idea. You could just write a story. Just write your story. There's nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, it could be really good for you. Who I was should be directional in terms of where I came from. Who I am should say, here's the growth areas that I have done, and here's the hard edges that need to be refined still. Who I am and who I want to be. Like, it needs to be based on what your gifts, your talents, your abilities are. And a lot of people look selfishly at this category. And I would say there's a different way of doing it. Look at what your community, your nation, and the world needs you to be also. Because you have, most of you out there are underestimating your power and potential as an individual to impact the world around you. You just are. We continuously underperform. It's a pretty typical story. So what I would tell you is when you get to the who do I want to be, I would be looking at my limitations and the areas where I am excellent. So let me break it down like this. I remember when I was playing baseball, one of the cool things that scouts, the national scouts or the team scouts would do when you would do a tryout is they'd give you a card and you'd fill it out at the beginning of the tryout. You put your name on there and position you play, just some basic information, height, weight, stuff like that. You put all this stuff on there, and then throughout the day, as they observe you, they're putting check boxes in different categories: speed, left, right, agility, hand-eye coordination, bat speed, like all these different pieces of information. The check above, and they did it really simply. And I actually think that there's a benefit in keeping it real simple. They did below average, average, above average, excellent. Pretty simple scale. There are areas, there are things that you bring to the world, your community, your family, that are excellent, and you need to know what those are, because those point toward what you can do for your community, your family, your world. You also want to know where you're below average, because a lot of people, let's say I'm not a great artist, because I'm not. I do enjoy it from time to time, but I'm not good at it. So if I decided I wanted to become an artist, I have a limited potential. It's just not my great talent. Could I have developed it? Probably not. Probably not. I was not made to become an amazing elite artist. But my neighbor is phenomenal. If I tried to be the artist that he is, it wouldn't be good. Even if I put 10,000 hours into it, it still probably wouldn't be good. It'd probably still be like, I might be able to go from below average to average, but let's be real. I mean, who's buying average art? Unless there's some sort of corruption or like their family. They're just not. So knowing these things about who you were and who you are helps point you to who you can be. That's going to be most helpful to you, your family, your friends, your community, your nation, and the world around us. So when I get right down to it, when I look at the second worst disorder in America of identity, it's not that complicated, but it does take time. When a lot of people get frustrated with how much time it takes to become good at something, and good at something meaning like knowing who you are. What I would suggest is maybe this week, this month, you do the who I was in those different stages. Maybe next month you do the who I am. And then maybe the month after that, you do the who I want to be. The rule of thumb that I teach people is the 3% rule, folks. What I'm doing is giving you bite sizes so that you can 3% change this year. All right. Some years you might do 5, some a little bit more. Some years you might only do 1 or 2% change. But aim for that 3%. You change 3% this year, 3% next year, 3% the year after. And no, it doesn't take you 30 years to change. The pie changes, the size of it. When you take 3% this year and then next year, you take another 3% bite, you're taking it out of a totally different sized pie. That makes it more like a 4% bite, even though it's only 3%, because it's always based on who you currently are. So take your bite. Do the world a favor. Do yourself a favor. Address this serious problem. Look at your principles. Look at your pillars, those priorities of life. But you can't do it without looking at who you were. You can't do it. It won't be accurate. It won't be based in reality. You can't do it without looking at who you are. Like, where am I? Who am I today? And you definitely can't do it if you don't look at who you want to be. All of your pillars, your priorities, your principles are pointing to the ultimate goal. So for me, those of you who know me well, you know exactly where that's pointing me. I'm a Christ follower, and I have been for a long time. That is where I'm going. Will I ever be on a cross? I hope not. It's look painful. But I do know I want to embody to the best of my ability, what Christ has taught me to be. So that helps me know where I'm going. What I do between here and there, I mean, that's based on what gifts I have. And I don't know those if I don't look at who I was, who I am, and where I think I'm supposed to go. All right. I hope this helps. Remember your tip of the day. You need to know who you are, who you were, and who you want to be. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. We appreciate our audience a lot, so we give you some simple ways to track us down. Please like, subscribe, and follow all the podcasts on different platforms, but you can also email us at healthyperspectives at protonmail.com, or you can check out our website at healthy-perspectives.com/podcast. It's a backward slash. So if you want to go to our landing page, if you go to healthy-perspectives.com, you'll still find us. You just got to click on the podcast button. Thank you so much.